The great polymathic Charles Munger, born January 1, 1924, passed away on November 28, 2023. An American lawyer, businessman, investor, and philanthropist, he was vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway from 1978 until his demise in 2023. Warren Buffett described Charlie Munger as his right-hand man and closest partner, and the architect of modern Berkshire Hathaway's investment philosophy, with Warren Buffett himself as the general contractor. In this video, we provide 12 investment lessons from his final interview with CNBC's Becky 2 weeks before his passing. Please watch until the end to learn the investment lessons. If you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe.
Well, it'll be interesting. It's certainly a peculiar example of one life. It's interesting that a man who started out to be a lawyer ended up with an identity that's more like a guru's than a lawyer's.
You found Ben Franklin when? How young were you when you first came across what Ben Franklin had done?
Well, I think high school, yeah.
And that's when you started modeling yourself after some of the things?
I don't know when I started modeling myself after Franklin, but I certainly tried to model myself a little. I like the mixture of financial life and regular life. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't copy. I didn't have any musical ability. And so Franklin he played 4 different musical instruments, one of which he invented. Well, this is a lot of musical ability that God simply left out of me. And so I can't do it. So I never made any effort to imitate Franklin's musical ability. But any other ability he had, of course, I tried to imitate. Just imagine what the world would be like. You know, we had photographs for 100 years before we had modern chemistry. But no, it was done by a guy who was a natural, very good chemist. But nonetheless, and he created a mighty company, a great growth stock, and so forth. And it finally wiped out the shareholders in bankruptcy.
Eastman Kodak.
Yes, Eastman Kodak. Yeah. Which is an amazing story that could happen. And of course, it helped me because if somebody as brilliant as old Eastman, and somebody who hired as many brilliant people as old Eastman did, could take the company into bankruptcy, I figured that lesser people could easily take big companies into bankruptcy eventually, in spite of their best efforts. It wasn't like Kodak didn't try. They hired the most brilliant graduate students. They gave them all kinds of time to think. They learned everything any important man on earth learned as quickly as they could, and so on and so on. And even so, they wiped out the common shareholders.
And that taught you what, as an investor, as a businessman?
Sure, and I was going to be a common shareholder someday in some company, and it would help me to know that it was very easy to wipe out the common shareholders, even a great company run by a genius.
A few years earlier, Warren Buffett says,
the whole long-term capital management, and I hope most of you are familiar with it, but the whole story is really fascinating, because if you take John Meriwether and Eric Rosenfeld, Larry Hillenbrand, Greg Hawkins, Victor Agani, the 2 Nobel Prize winners, Merton and Scholes, if you take the 16 of them, they probably have as high an average IQ as any 16 people working together in one business in the country, including at Microsoft or wherever you want to name. So there's an incredible amount of intellect in that room. Now you combine that with the fact that those 16 had extensive experience in the field they were operating. I mean, this was not a bunch of guys who had made their money, selling men's clothing and then all of a sudden went into the securities business or anything. They'd had in aggregate, the 16 had probably had 350 or 400 years of experience doing exactly what they were doing. And then you throw in the third factor, that most of them had virtually all of their very substantial net worths in the business. So they had their own money up, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money up, super high intellect, working in a field they knew, and essentially they went broke. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. I mean, if I ever write a book, it's going to be called Why Smart People Do Dumb Things. My partner says it should be autobiographical, but
As a little boy, I carried more money than all the other little boys. When I used to shoot agates in the schoolyard to make money playing competitive agates.
Marbles?
I made sure, marbles, but agates were the most valuable marble. And I never wanted to lose my good, valuable collection. Some guy was more coordinated than I was at shooting marbles. So I would never play for stakes unless I could play better than the other boy.
That's kind of been a habit you've made throughout life. You don't play poker with someone you're going to lose with.
Exactly.
Right.
I didn't always arrange the circumstances. I just fell into them very frequently. But I got to play with competitors who were dumbcoffs.
People who weren't assessing the odds quite the same way?
No. Weren't assessing it. They weren't assessing the odds the way it was easy to assess the odds. If you learned it, you paid attention when the teacher was teaching you permutations and combinations your second year in high school. The minute they taught me those things, I looked at them. And the math teacher who was teaching me was a dumbcoff. And of course, he didn't have any idea how they were important and why. He just taught them as one more thing he had to teach to get through the textbook. And I immediately realized that these things were terribly important. It would do wonders for me if I mastered them. But my math teacher didn't know that.
A lot of what you do, though, also is picking your shots. I mean, I think you call it sit on your ass investing.
Yeah,
Where
sure.
you wait for the big fat pitches to come in. You don't do a lot over time because
That's correct.
you don't want taxes to whittle down or anything else along the way.
No. And it's perfectly obvious that every intelligent person ought to do that. And a lot of the intelligent people have figured it out. If you go into the decisions that the teaching profession makes with its IRA money and its pension money, where it gets any choice, a lot of it is indexed and a lot of it is invested in shrewd investments held for a long time. So a lot of what I do is being done now, and that wasn't true when I was young. I couldn't just look at somebody else and see some. I saw some people who'd gotten rich by holding a few good things.
So you think it's harder to make money now?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's a very important question. And of course it's harder. It's so much harder you can't believe it. The people that have found it harder are the people that made Warren so rich. Ben Graham and his colleague Dodd in a damned adjunct course at Columbia. And by the way, Graham was invited into 3 different economic departments at Columbia on the full tenure track and turned them down. He was that good at literature and math and so forth. Both, which is rare. And Ben Graham was interesting. Ben Graham was polymathic, like the Davises, a different way. And the same thing, also somewhat musical. And so something of a dancer. He liked to dance well. Something left out of me. And at any rate, what Ben Graham did that was so interesting is that he taught that you should find a few good things and stay with them for a very long time. But a long time to him was a few years. It wasn't a few decades. And he did that for like 40 or 50 years in a little investment partnership with incentives and so on. And his investors, who were by and large not very rich, did very well with him. After he got his share, they got a good cut that was higher than what other people got after fees. And so he delivered a valuable product. And he taught you got into things, it could be a lousy business, but if they were cheap enough, they're still all right if they had enough assets per share. Right. So you're getting at least twice as many assets as you were paying for. Yeah. and he just floated around for the best available stuff among companies, good and bad.
Yeah.
That was his system. And he had worked for 50 years. His clients had good returns. Well, after he became so famous, partly with the help of Warren Buffett and Warren Buffett's success, everybody tried to do the same thing. And of course, as everybody crowded in, trying to be a little Ben Graham, it got more and more competitive. And that's what's happened now. And the low-hanging fruit that Ben Graham had a lot of because of the Great Depression has gone away. And if you just try and float from one undervalued bad business into another and pay all the costs and so forth, it just doesn't work well enough for the people that actually put up the money to be worth bothering with. That's the way it works now. But in Graham's time, it was the best way there was.
Well, your upgrade on that was to just look for good businesses.
I saw immediately that Graham was wrong.
Right, and you look for...
And the real money was in the really great companies,
Right.
which carried you up and up and up and up and up.
Is it...
And whoever, but I did not really think that we'd ever have one. There were so many hundreds of billions in Berkshire. I did not anticipate when Warren and I were starting with our little piddly start that we'd ever get to 100 billion, much less several hundred billion. It was an amazing occurrence.
What happened that you didn't anticipate? What led to that success?
Well, we got a little less crazy than most people, and a little less stupid than most people, and that really helped us. Then in addition, we were given this much longer time to run than most people because something kept us alive into our 90s. And that gave us a long track from our little fiddling start all the way to the 90s. Those are the two things that really happened. And of course, we wised up over time. We got into better and better companies, and we understood more and more of the bad things that could happen to you and how easy they could creep in. And we avoided them even more assiduously when we were old than we did when we were young. And it all worked. The main trick that Berkshire shows is the power of what I call the Wooden effect. And Wooden was the most famous basketball coach of the whole era. And you figure out what the hell he really did, which of course, somebody like Warren and me, we just automatically do it. He concentrated about 90% of the playing time in 7 players. And everybody else was just a sparring partner for the people. And that turned out a great system for winning at basketball because you identified your best player and concentrated so much of the playing time on your best player. And more playing creates better. You learn by playing in a way you can never learn just by shooting practice baskets. And so he concentrated all his playing time on his best players. Simple idea. That's what Berkshire did. Of course, it worked better, and everybody's learned it.
You've talked about...
Everybody would know it automatically if it were just a little more obvious. If all of us had to make a living backing people in chess tournaments where there's very little revenue to pay anybody anything, we'd all recognize we have to get into the top 7 players or something like that, or have no chance of winning, chess tournaments.
Yeah.
And everybody would be trying to play the Wooden style to get the bet. But in investment picking, people think anybody can learn it who just goes to Harvard or Columbia or something. And of course, anybody can't learn it. It's like chess or mechanical ability or a lot of other abilities. It's somebody who does it a lot and has a natural aptitude for it, who's the outlier, who gets the big results. And that's what happens in the investment world. Just a few outliers make the money. Now, we've also created a whole lot of people who get the reputation of being geniuses, who run venture capital funds and so forth, and who do pretty well for themselves because they get paid so outlandishly. But they don't really get, the bottom 80% of the people who invest in venture capital would be better off if they didn't even look at it.
You talked about some of the joy you found with some of the investments Berkshire's made along the way. I think Washington Post was a great
who doesn't
one.
like to happily enjoy extreme success accumulated with people who are extremely admirable? That's what Warren and I have gotten to do. Yeah. Well, of course, that's a lot of fun. And a lot of the people at Sequoia have had a lot of fun because they've done a lot of similar things. All the great records are partly work, partly talent, and partly luck. That's what you'd expect to win. Well, with this many people in the game of investment, of course the big winners are going to be people who get luck and who get work and talent and luck. That's what we've had. And what was interesting about Berkshire's history is what turned the first $300 million of Berkshire net worth into the first $3 billion of Berkshire net worth. Now, some people have now gone back and checked all that figures, but some people figured it out. But the way the results we got in turning 300 million into 3 billion really quickly helped us a lot.
What was it?
Well, it was blue chip, stamps, and See's Candy, and the Buffalo News newspaper, and the early insurance operations under Ajit Jain when he came to us. And so it just, everything worked at once. And we made these unholy profits out of these fiddling businesses that weren't that good. And it was a very remarkable thing. And there was some luck involved.
Warren has said that his worst trade ever was buying Berkshire Hathaway itself, the mills.
Yeah, sure.
What was your worst trade?
Well, I think my worst trade was buying a block for the Munger family in Alibaba, which is a pretty good company, but I think it got overhyped. And Jack Ma made mistakes in dealing with the Chinese government. I had some everybody has some bad ones. Yeah. You have an off day. The greatest tennis player goes out there someday to the center court and has a bad day. It happens.
I think people learn more from their mistakes sometimes than
and their bad days even.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what really is knowing you can have a very bad day. Do not live your life in such a fashion that a bad day can kill you.
Mm-hmm. Which means what when it comes to investing? Making sure you don't use leverage?
Well, they aim for the fences. It's like a hitter at baseball who tries to hit a home run on every pitch. Yeah. The great home hitters do not remotely swing at every pitch. That's halfway good. They wait for one that they can really handle. And that's what great stock pickers do too.
I think some of the lessons in life that you give people, though, I guess if it's so much harder to do things now, and you've talked about this, how for this generation it's going to be harder to do things like buy a house, make the same sort of money, be able to get ahead in such ways.
Of course. It's going to be harder to earn the same kind of percentage returns after taxes and inflation as this last generation of endowment managers earned. They've trained all these universities to expect a 6% yield return because that's what they want in order to do what to spend as they want. But it is not given in the stars that a 6% annual return will surely be wonderful for the good investors of an era.
I mean more broadly.
the great bulk of the investor may earn a lot less than 6% instead of a lot more.
I just mean for, the average person who's looking at this thinking it's going to be harder to buy a house. Is the American dream further out of reach for young people today?
Well, for some it is, and for some it isn't. There also was never a place where anybody who got a degree in computer science got a salary, a cash bonus, and a block of cheap stock every year for free, just floating in. And sometimes in a very good company. And there are more companies like that are offering benefits like that to people that are just starting out in computer science. So in some sense, it's easier. So for some people, it's easier. There'll always be something in a rich civilization that's a little better than other people get, as well as a little worse. And all these people prospering today in computer science are in the right place, and they're prospering more.
But part of your advice in life, I think, is to understand that change comes with life and adapt to it. And it's something I think about a lot in my own struggles with life.
Everybody knows that. I could have done a lot better if I'd been a little smarter, a little quicker.
What are you talking about? You've had success in everything you've done in life. What would you like to do differently?
I might have had multiple trillions instead of multiple billions.
Do you sit around thinking about this? What would you have done differently?
Yes, I think a lot about what I nearly missed by being just not quite smart enough or hardworking enough.
What would you have changed if you could go back and look at the last 100 years?
Of course, it would be a cinch to go back and do it, knowing what was going to happen now. I would be the richest man on earth.
Well, what did you miss? What was there? Something where you zigged where you could have
started earlier, for one thing, and I would have compounded longer, and I would have compounded better.
So saved even more.
And of course, I would have ended up richer. I was going to live to be 100 years old. And I constantly am aware of the facts that I basically screwed up. Given the hand I dealt, I could have done a lot better, quite easily done a lot better.
A few years earlier, Charlie Munger says,
I hope these ruminations of an old man are useful to you. In the end, I'm like Old Valiant for Truth in Pilgrim's Progress. My sword I leave to him who can wear it.